I went to renew my driver's license, and the state told me I was dead. Not sick, not mistaken. Dead. My insurance canceled. My bank frozen. And at the bottom of a printed form in black ink was the name of the person who verified my death. My son. I'm Nancy Bowers. I've lived 68 honest years in a small Michigan town. I raised a boy on casseroles and double shifts, paid off a house with pennies and prayer, and learned to keep going after my husband died. But nothing prepared me for the day my own child filed papers to erase me so he could cash in on the life I'm still living. So I did what mothers do when the ground disappears. I stood up, I made a list. I found a lawyer who believed me, a neighbor who's seen men lie, and a place where no one could sign me out of my life again. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about proof of life, and the one sentence I told my son that drew a line he'll never cross again. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll know exactly how a quiet woman took her name back, and her future. They didn't call my name so much as they called my number. The plastic ticket in my hand read B174, and when it blinked on the screen above the Michigan Secretary of State counter, I stood up the way I've stood up my whole life, politely, hopeful that this would be simple, determined to get it done. Next, the clerk said. She had a coffee ring on a stack of forms and the tired smile of someone who has been apologizing all morning. Hi, I said. I'm here to renew my license. It expires next week. Name? Nancy Bowers. She typed. The keyboard clicks were quick and flat. Then they stopped, her eyebrows pulled in as if she'd misread something. She typed again, slower, leaning forward, eyes narrowing at the screen. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said, voice careful. I can't renew your license. Did I forget to bring something? She licked her lips. This is saying you're deceased. The word was quiet, like it could break if she said it too loudly. I laughed, a short, wrong sound. I can assure you I'm not. I'm sure, she said, looking at me like people look at their own hands when they won't stop shaking. But the system shows a certificate of death was filed last month. I can't override this. You'll need to go to the county clerk to correct it, and Social Security. My ticket slid out of my hand and hit the floor. The sound was too loud in my ears for something so small. I understand this is upsetting, she said. It happens, rarely, usually after a clerical error. If you talk to vital records at the county, they can issue a letter for us. How would they even have a... I stopped. The clerk's eyes were wet. That was new. People don't cry for strangers unless they've cried for themselves a lot this week. Good luck, Miss Bowers, she said softly. I walked outside into a thin winter sun that didn't warm anything. Not the top of my head, not my neck, not the doubt growing in my stomach. I stood on the cracked sidewalk with my purse strap digging into my coat and let a cold breeze remind me I was very much alive. On the drive home, I waited for the shock to pass. It didn't. The radio murmured oldies through static. A man sang about coming home. I didn't. I turned into the pharmacy instead. I set my blood pressure prescription on the counter. The new pharmacy tech, she couldn't be more than 20, flipped through screens, tapped a few keys, and smiled the way people smile when they don't want to bring trouble to your door. Insurance isn't going through, she said. Looks like, I'm so sorry. This says the policy is inactive due to death. I didn't say anything. She searched my face for the joke. I kept the joke off my face. I can pay cash, I said, and did. Hands steady on my wallet like I always kept a little extra cash for days like this. When I reached the car, I sat with the pill bottle turning in my gloved hand until the white label blurred. Once, when my husband was alive, he told me there are two kinds of problems. The kind you can fix with money and the kind you can't. If it's the first kind, Nancy, be grateful, he'd said. If it's the second, get help. Dan's been gone 15 years. My son says I still quote him too much. I think about quotes because they're what we hold on to when nothing else feels steady. But there I was, auto insurance card in my glove box, prescription in my hand, and a brand new problem I didn't know which kind it was. The kind that takes money, or the kind that takes something I didn't have anymore? I drove home to Gray Harbor, Michigan, the lake town that sits a little west of the middle of the palm if you make a mitten with your hand. Our house, my house now, was a one-story ranch with a stubborn front door that swelled in summer and a roof Dan and I replaced one May when the shingles started curling like leaves. In the front yard was the bird bath he'd cemented to the ground after a raccoon knocked it over twice. I parked, got out, and stood there while a chickadee landed on the rim and looked at me like the dead don't feed birds. Inside, I set down my purse on the entry table. The answering machine blinked like the heartbeat of an old appliance. One message. Miss Bowers, this is Carrie from Lakeside Mutual. We're calling to confirm receipt of the claim packet for policy ending in 1134. Beneficiary listed is Eric Bowers. Please call us with any questions. My son's name sounded like someone else's. I replayed the message. I listened to the shape of my own silence on the tape, the empty air between this woman's words and the last thing she said to me that didn't feel like on hold. I stood in the kitchen where I'd cooked for 30 years, the linoleum a little scuffed by the sink, the spice rack where the cumin always fell behind the paprika, the green ceramic bowl where I kept my avocados. I looked at it all and pictured my son at his dining table, a granite slab that seats 8, the kind with legs that look like they're doing push-ups. Lauren likes things like that. She's my son's wife. She's beautiful in the way of women who know when light hits a room. He married up, people say, and they're not wrong. But I didn't raise him to be wrong about the kind of person you become when money sits at your table. I called the county clerk's office. The woman on the phone was kind, brisk, familiar with trouble. It happens more than you'd think, she said. Call it bad data, bad actors, or bad luck. You'll need to come in with your ID and anything you have that proves you are who you say you are. Birth certificate, social security card, passport if you have it. We'll pull the certificate and fix it. What does it say? The one you have? I can't read it to you on the phone, but when you're here, you can see it. I hung up and looked at the wall calendar. Boats and lighthouses for January, a red circle around Eric's birthday on the 12th that I'd drawn last year in blue pen. I had mailed him a card with a gift card tucked inside. He'd texted me a thumbs up emoji. That's what you get for birthday phone calls now. Gratitude boiled down to a sticker. I called my son anyway, as if I didn't already hear the truth breathing underneath every fact. He didn't answer. His voicemail was the same as it always is. You've reached Eric. Like he's a brand more than a person. I didn't leave a message. I stared at the phone until it dimmed and left me with my own reflection. At the county clerk, there was a plastic pen on a chain that scratched like a cat. I wrote my name. The clerk printed a copy of the certificate. She slid it across the counter face down like a test I'd failed. Take your time, she said, the way people say the only thing they can say. I turned it over. There it was. My name in a black serif font that looked like Sunday newspapers. My birth date, a date of death. The cause, cardiac arrest. The place, home. An informant signature scrawled beside my son's name. Where did this come from? I asked. My voice sounded like when you call into the wind and the wind doesn't call back. The funeral home initiates the record, the clerk said, carefully neutral. Then it's certified. I didn't have a funeral, I said. I've been making oatmeal and calling my sister and reading paperbacks and taking my walk to the lake. I was at the hardware store last week asking the kid what size screws I need for a sagging cabinet. I didn't have a funeral. I know, she said. She had soft eyes. I can issue a letter today that you can take to Social Security. We'll flag this for investigation. We'll need to involve vital records and possibly law enforcement. But we'll get the letter for you. Proof of life for agencies and banks. Proof of life is the kind of phrase you think belongs to movies. But there it was, sitting in my hands, slack with shock. Can I ask a question? I said. Of course. If the informant on this is my son, does that mean he filed it? She kept her face like a blank page. The informant can be listed by the funeral home based on who provided information, not necessarily who filed. This will all be looked into. I set the paper down and stared at my name again. The letters of my first name had always been curved and soft. They looked different on here, harder somehow. I folded it carefully like it was dangerous and stood up. Outside, a thin snow had started, flakes that would be slush by noon, that would stick to the edges of car windows by afternoon, that would turn to puddles and then ice by evening. I thought of all the weathers I'd lived through in this town. rain that looked like smoke, heat that made the roads wobble, winters that cracked our hands into maps. All that weather, and here I was with a new season I had never imagined. The time in my life when my son decided I was worth more dead than alive. Back home, I called Lakeside Mutual. The hold music was bouncy in a way no one's life ever is. "Thank you for holding," a man said when he came on. "How can I help?" "My name is Nancy Bowers," I said. "You called about a claim on my life insurance. I'm alive. I'd like to know who submitted a claim and when." He was quiet a moment, the kind of quiet where you can hear someone set their coffee down. "Miss Bowers," he said, "I am very glad to be speaking to you. We had some flags in the system that didn't add up. The claim was submitted by the listed beneficiary. We triggered a review. The claim is on hold." "Who is the beneficiary?" "Your policy lists your son, Eric." The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a garbage truck banged the lid of my neighbor's can like a stubborn heart. "I want to file a fraud report," I said. "We'll notate everything," he said. "You'll also want to contact Social Security so your benefits aren't interrupted. Do you have a trusted person who can help you coordinate? This can get frustrating." "I'll manage," I said, and hung up, and then did the thing I promised myself I wouldn't. I sat at my kitchen table, put my face in my hands, and cried in a way that was quieter than grief and louder than disappointment. When the tears were done, there was the business of it all. I had always been good at the business of life. I organize, I list, I fix. That afternoon, I pulled out a notebook and wrote at the top of a clean page, "Plan for the living, Social Security office. 2, bank. 3, lawyer. 4, make copies of everything." I didn't write 5. Call Eric, because that had its own number that belonged to a life we used to have. Before I left, I walked down our hallway to the room that had been my son's when he was small, then a guest room, then a storage space for empty boxes and tape, and a stack of picture frames I'd never gotten around to hanging. On the shelf, his high school track trophy leaned against a box of Christmas lights. I traced the little brass runner's foot with my finger until the dust smudged and made a line across the base that looked like a measure of time. We had been close once. He had said "Mom" in the tone boys use when they're proud of the mother who shows up in the rain. Then he grew, and I grew older, and the space between us filled with successes he shared with his wife before he shared them with me, if he shared them at all. Once at Thanksgiving, Lauren laughed at my sweater. "So cozy," she'd said, like cozy was a synonym for a person without edges. She complicated things and made them prettier at the same time. That's talent. I locked the door. I took a breath. I went back to the list. The Social Security office was a room of gray chairs and postcards of other happier places taped to cubicle walls. We produced a stack of proofs. A clerk took copies of everything and said, "These cases can take weeks. We'll work as fast as we can." At the bank, the manager's smile was practiced. "Your account was frozen because of a notification," she said. "You'll need official proof from the county to lift it." "I have that," I said, and slid the letter across. She disappeared behind a door, came back, and nodded. "We'll restore access by tomorrow." When I asked for my balances, she printed a sheet. "There was also a request to transfer funds from your savings to an estate account," she said. "We flagged it because we hadn't received an official executor letter from the court. Who requested it?" She looked at me over the top of the paper. "Someone claiming to represent the estate of Nancy Bowers, deceased." I thanked her for not saying the rest. After the bank, I turned left instead of right and drove toward the lake. The shoreline had that winter color that looks like the world has been rubbed down to bone. But even in February, Lake Michigan can steal your breath and hand it back. I parked near the public pier and walked to the end. 2 teenagers sat on a bench tossing bits of fries to gulls. A woman in a red hat took very controlled steps in the snow, a cane marking time beside her. A man in a Carhartt jacket sipped something from a thermos and watched water like it owes him something. When Dan died, this is where I learned to use my legs again. I came here every morning for a year. I counted 20 steps forward, 10 steps back, and sometimes I counted my own breath so I wouldn't drown on dry land. I learned I could stand and not fall. I learned that grief teaches you to hold on to railings, and that railings teach you to trust what is solid. Now I looked down at my hands and thought about how they had held my son's head when he was born, and stirred sauce in our old kitchen, and ironed his shirt for his 8th grade dance, and signed 1,000 permission slips for a boy who would grow up to use a pen to say I was gone. On the way home, I took Maple Street a little slower. My neighbor, Walter Henderson, stood on his porch with a shovel. He's 71, retired after 35 years with the Gray Harbor Police Department, the kind of man who knows which boards on his porch squeak and fixes them anyway. He looked up when he heard my car and waved. I pulled in, turned off the engine, and joined him. "Need a hand?" I said. "I'm delaying the inevitable," he said. He lifted a scoop of snow and deposited it like he was rearranging furniture at a pace he could live with. "You okay? You look like you're traveling without luggage," I told him. "Not all of it. Not the parts that would make a man like Walt go looking for another man and forget the years that taught him better, but enough." He listened the way cops listen when they're off duty, careful, without the impatience of lights flashing behind something. "Don't call him," he said when I was done. "I wasn't planning to." "Don't warn him. If you warn him, you'll lose your evidence. Let the process work. Make yourself a witness." "That's what I'm trying to be," I said, "to my own life." He's not a man given to hugs, but he took off his glove, put his hand on my shoulder, and squeezed once. "Good," he said. "Come by later. I'll make coffee that tastes like regret, and we'll talk about what to do next." At home, I sat back down at the kitchen table. There's a thing that happens when the world tilts, and no one else feels it. Your own house looks like a stage. You notice the place where the paint chipped by the pantry door, the mail basket a little too full, the way the light slants across the floor and shows the dust. You think about sweeping. You don't. I called a lawyer whose name I'd kept from when Dan died. Her card had been in a folder marked "Important" that I'd tucked away in the shoebox other people keep recipes. Her name was Megha Patel. People called her Meg. "You don't know me," I said when she picked up, "but I think my son has declared me dead." "I know you now," she said, voice as steady as a countertop. "Tell me everything." I did. She asked questions that were a handrail, not a trap. "We need to act on 3 tracks," she said when I finished. "First, clear your records with the agencies. You're on that. Second, lock down your finances and property so nothing can move without your say-so. Third, decide what you want to do about your son." "I want to not destroy him," I said, "but I'm going to destroy the part of him that thought this was okay." "That's fair," she said. "Also, we may need to alert law enforcement if you want to pursue charges." "I'll think," I said. "I want to do this clean. I want to sleep." "You'll sleep again," she said. "It just might not be tonight." We met the next morning. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and a little bit like someone had made toast earlier. She was a small woman with hair she pinned with 2 bobby pins like she was holding the day in place. She laid out papers like a map. "We'll file to correct your records," she said. "We'll notify your insurers and banks. We'll put your house under a trust for now so it can't be grabbed by an estate proceeding." "A trust?" "It's a box you put your house in so that people can't reach it," she said. "We'll make you the trustee. It's still your house. But it's not called your house in the way someone who thinks you're dead would try to claim it." "And Eric? We will not tell him anything he doesn't already know," she said, voice neutral. "We'll let him make moves that tell us who he is while we document who you are." "What if he shows up?" I asked. "What if he knocks on the door and asks for sugar like a boy again?" "Then you decide what you want to say," she said. "And I'll be here if you want me in the next room." I signed papers that said I had a right to live. I signed papers that said the house was not a fruit for someone else to pick. I signed my name until it didn't look like mine anymore, and then I signed it one more time just to teach it to come home. That afternoon, I pulled a sweater over my head and saw in the mirror what I always see, a 68-year-old woman with gray hair and a face that has lived through as much as it could without breaking, and a body that does what I ask it on most days. There were lines that ran down from my nose like parentheses, and I liked the idea that my life had a lot in it. I made tea. I didn't call my son. In the days that followed, I learned what it is to die on paper. Medicare suspended my coverage. My utility company said their condolences and then asked to speak to the executor of my estate. The library emailed to ask if I wanted to renew 3 books that would now be considered stolen if no one corrected the record. I wrote back, I'm alive and I will bring the books back on Thursday. The librarian responded with a heart emoji. I put the books on the front seat of my car like they were passengers I needed to bring home. I took my daily walk to the lake. I made soup. I folded towels and stacked them in neat piles that made me feel like control was a thing you could make with the right corners. And then I did something that surprised me. I went online and looked up independent living communities 2 towns over. The Legacy at Harbor Pines had a website with photos that looked almost real, like the photographer had not asked anyone to smile a certain way. There was a woman in a denim shirt at a painting class with blue paint on her hands. A man stood in a garden as if he'd been checking the soil and then remembered the camera was there. There were trees, a small chapel, a common room with chairs that looked like they'd remember your shape. I made an appointment for a tour. I packed my hesitation with my scarf. Harbor Pines was on the edge of town where the highway sighs, a cluster of buildings with green roofs and balconies that looked toward a stand of pines that kept their promises. Patricia at the front desk had a pencil stuck behind her ear and the kind of voice that makes you walk slower. "We have 2 one-bedrooms open," she said. "One faces the gardens, one faces the parking lot. Guess which one everyone wants." "I won't make you play favorites," I said, and she laughed. She took me from room to room, listing small things that felt big. The library on the 2nd floor with afternoon sun. The chapel where an interfaith service rotated each week. The dining room where the chef made meatloaf on Wednesdays and apple crisp when he felt like someone needed it. The green chairs in the lounge that rocked just enough. There was a door to the patio that slid open without complaint. "We have yoga on Fridays," she said. "Quilting on Tuesdays. A bus that goes to the farmer's market on Saturdays when it's warm. Memorial services in the chapel for people who want them and quiet in between for people who don't." "Is it sad here?" I asked. It felt like a rude question and a necessary one. "It's where people come to remember that sad and happy are neighbors," she said. "We don't pretend one lives alone." I stood in the garden-facing unit and looked out at a pine that had weathered more winters than I'll ever count. I closed my eyes and pictured myself with morning light on my hands and no one on the other side of the wall telling me I was gone. "I'll take it," I heard myself say. Patricia smiled in a way that looked like relief. "I'll get the paperwork," she said. I went home and started to sort. I donated the coats that I used to save for just in case. I packed the things that felt like they'd last inside me and not just inside a box. The mixing bowl Dan and I bought with wedding money from my aunt, the framed picture of Eric at 5 with ice cream on his chin, the ceramic mug I bought at the craft fair where a woman told me her kiln worked like patience. I wrapped my mother's rosary in a dish towel and put it in my purse, not because I pray with it anymore, but because sometimes you need to hold on to the beads of your life. On the 3rd day of sorting, Eric called. "Mom," he said when I answered, his voice pitched too high, a tone I hadn't heard since he was 10 and broke a window with a baseball. "Where have you been? I tried to call you before and then I got distracted, but now this is important. We need to talk." I looked at the box on the table labeled Keep. I put the tape down. "I've been alive," I said. He exhaled, embarrassed or impatient. I couldn't tell. "Okay, look," he said slower. "There's been a mix-up. I don't know how it happened. Some paperwork. I'm trying to fix it." "What did you file, Eric?" I said, voice quiet. "I went to the county. I saw my own death certificate. I saw your name." "You weren't supposed to see that," he said, and the back of my neck went cold. "What was I supposed to see?" "Nothing," he said, words tumbling. "Nothing. It was a mistake. I can fix it. Lauren's dad gave me this investment opportunity, and then we had the IVF bills, and I thought we were going to have good news, and then we didn't, and I panicked. It was supposed to be temporary. Insurance processes take months. I was going to cancel it before they paid anything. People say we when they don't want to say I alone. You declared me dead," I said. "You tried to take money meant for when I'm gone so you could spend it when I'm still here. You put my house in the path of a storm and hoped your name would be the only thing left on the deed when it passed." "That's not fair," he said quick. "I've done so much for you." "I raised you," I said. "I did your math homework when you cried. I cut up apples the way you liked for 2 years straight. I taught you to check the weather before you went out. I taught you the names of constellations because your father would have wanted to. I didn't buy a new couch for 20 years so you could go to college without owing anyone your soul." I didn't go on trips because you needed braces. I didn't date for 5 years because you were afraid a man would take me away. And then you put my name on a certificate that said I had left you." Silence. You can measure a life in silences. This one sat heavy and round. "Can we come by?" he said finally. "Can Lauren and I come tonight and talk?" "No," I said, and felt something inside me stand up. "I'm moving." "Moving where?" "To a place where I am the one who calls myself alive," I said. "You can call my lawyer. Her name is Meg. She'll talk to you if you want to show up in the part of your life where truth lives." "You're being dramatic, Mom." "No," I said, "I'm being clear." I hung up and stood staring at the phone, the little black mirror that shows you a face you thought you knew. I waited for regret to take me by the shoulders and shake. It didn't. It sat in the chair across from me and admitted it was going to take a while to get used to this new room. A week later, I moved into Harbor Pines. My house didn't cry when I closed the door behind me. It sighed the way old wood does, a sound I realized I had been calling mine. I left it clean. I left a note for the neighbor kid who shovels my walk with a $20 bill tucked inside. I took the bird bath base from the yard. The bowl was cemented and heavy. I left it to the birds, and I hoped Eric would see it one day and remember he used to sit there and make a wish. The first night in the new apartment, I slept like I hadn't in months. Morning came over the pines like it had to work for it. I made coffee and stood on the balcony while a squirrel scolded me for being on its route. The air tasted like metal and something green. That afternoon, I went to the quilting circle. I have never quilted anything. I've mended, and that's different. Mending is telling a whole, it doesn't mean the end. Quilting is deciding something new is what you're making on purpose. The class was led by a woman named Lila, a retired art teacher who wore silver bangles that clicked when she moved her hands. "Everyone thinks quilting is about stitching," she said. "It's about choosing colors, shapes, what you save and what you don't. The stitch is just how you tell those choices to stay together." We cut squares from old shirts and fabric that still smelled like dye. We arranged them. We rearranged them. We laughed when someone's square turned into a triangle. No one said, "I'm sorry," the way we all say when we take up space. By the end of the hour, there was a big mess on the table and the start of a pattern that looked like something I might want to sleep under. On Thursday, I met a man who used to teach gym and now taught people like me how to move so our hips wouldn't teach us the same lesson over and over. His name was Coach Benson, because once you're a coach, you always are. He wore track pants and a whistle he never blew. "Hold the bar," he said at the balance class. "If you wobble, it means you're doing something new. Your body is learning. We don't get better by never wobbling." I wobbled. I balanced. I walked back to my apartment with a kind of tired that felt like work, not worry. I put my hand on the door and felt safe. Meg called. "Social Security corrected your file," she said. "Your Medicare is active again. The bank released the hold. The insurer has formally suspended the claim pending investigation. Press wants nothing to do with your story because you're not famous enough. That's good news." "What about Eric?" I asked. "He retained an attorney," she said. "They reached out. He'd like to meet." "Where?" "At my office," she said. "In 2 days. I'll be there. You don't have to be, but if you come, you'll want to decide what your one sentence is so you don't say the 100 you'll regret." "1 sentence," I repeated. "I can do that." The night before the meeting, I filled the tub with hot water and slid in until the water covered everything I didn't want to carry into tomorrow. I thought about when Eric was 6 and got a splinter he refused to let me touch. He held his finger out like a holy thing while I tried to see through tears, his and mine, and finally I said, "Buddy, if you let me do the painful thing now, it won't hurt later." He let me. He screamed. He breathed. He fell asleep on the couch with his hand in a bowl of Cheerios, like they were treasure. I slept. In the morning, I put on my blue dress and a gray cardigan and the simple silver necklace Dan gave me on our 15th anniversary. I looked like a version of myself I recognized. I drove to Meg's office. On the way, I passed a field where snow geese had landed, a white moving river across brown stubble. I slowed, turned down the radio, and rolled my window down to hear the sound they make that tells you they're talking to one another about what comes next. Eric was in the conference room when I arrived, haircut shorter than last time I saw him, beard trimmed, shirt pressed. Lauren was with him, in a cream sweater and an expression that fenced off most of the room. His lawyer was a young woman with sharp edges who looked like she collects quiet wins and makes a pile of them in a drawer. "Mama," Eric said, standing fast enough to tip his chair, you look good." "I am," I said, and sat down. Meg sat beside me, put a folder down, and folded her hands. "I'm very sorry," Eric said, "for the confusion." Meg's pencil tapped once on the table, then rested. "You filed my death," I said. "That wasn't confusion, that was a decision." He swallowed. "It's funny how swallowing is loud when you're not the one doing it." "Let me explain," he said. "Before you do," I said, "listen to my one sentence." He nodded, eyes glossy. He looked 5 for half a second. Then he looked 34 again. "You can be my son," I said, "or you can be the man who tried to profit off my death, but you can't be both in my life." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm alive," I said, steady. "It means you will do the things the law and your own good would ask of you to make this right. You will withdraw the claim. You will provide a statement to any investigator that you filed based on panic and greed and pressure, and you will use your own words, no one else's, for that. You will not come to my house. You will not call me unless I call you. You will not show up at my door with flowers like this is a sitcom. You will sit with yourself and ask the kind of questions that make you sweat. And if you ever want to be my son again, I will consider it after I see who you are when no one is watching." Lauren scoffed, a small sound. "This is dramatic," she said. "This can be fixed with a phone call." "You can fix your own life with a phone call," I said, looking at her without blinking, "but not mine." Meg cleared her throat. "We're prepared to allow the civil side to resolve without a criminal complaint if all actions are withdrawn and an affidavit of responsibility is executed," she said. "However, Miss Bowers will coordinate with the authorities as they see fit. She is not instructing any agency not to do their job." The young lawyer nodded. "Understood. We'll advise our client accordingly." Eric looked like he was on a ship that just realized where the shore is. He wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand the way men do when they learn somewhere that a tissue is an admission. "You're my mother," he said. "I love you." "I hope you do," I said. "When you do something like this to a person you love, you have to find out why you thought love could coexist with harm and not show up to stop it." We stood to leave. He didn't reach for me. He had sense enough for that. Lauren gathered her purse and her patience and followed him out, looking over her shoulder once like I was a painting she didn't understand. In the weeks that followed, I learned new ways to be alive. The team at Social Security finished untangling the knot. I brought cookies to the office because sometimes the only weapon I have is gratitude and cookies. I met with the county investigator with Walt by my side. He kept his hands folded and his mouth shut and then spoke in a low tone when needed. "Don't make yourself smaller to make him bigger," he said to me in the hallway during a break. And I loved him for saying a thing like that out loud. Eric withdrew the claim. That didn't end the investigation. It softened edges. He provided a statement. He sat in an office under fluorescent lights and told a stranger on state paper that he had tried to turn something that should have made him weep into a number he could spend. I did not attend that meeting. I sat at Harbor Pines with Lila, stitching blue to blue and telling the story of a square. There were days I wanted to call him because that is what mothers do, and then I would hold Dan's necklace and remember the one sentence and take 3 deep breaths and drink water instead. I learned that not calling is a mothering too. It is holding a boundary like a bandage stays tied. I went to church in the chapel 3 Sundays in a row, even though God and I have an arrangement where I don't ask much, and he doesn't either. The woman who led that week read a passage about a lost coin. I thought about how sometimes you lose something and don't even know it's gone because you've been calling the noise it makes home. Spring came in slow, and then all at once the way it does here, like someone took the stopper out of winter. The trees outside my balcony went from strict to soft. The lake turned dark blue. Children in puffer jackets marched along the path below some mornings and waved with mittens. I waved back. Everything in me waved back. One afternoon, a letter arrived at Harbor Pines, addressed in Eric's handwriting. Inside was a page that looked like he'd written it 10 times and thrown away 9. He confessed. He listed the bills and the losses and the ways he thought he was making something okay by skirting the truth. He wrote the word greed. He wrote the word shame. He wrote that he needed time to become someone he could live with. He asked for time to become someone I might want to have coffee with in a place where the cups are chipped and nothing is fancy. I set the letter under the small rock I keep on my table for napkins and notes that otherwise would blow away. I sat with it. I let it be a thing I wasn't required to fix. The state decided not to charge him formally. They let him enter a program where he had to do community service and attend a class on elder financial abuse and pay a fine that made a loud ding when it left his account. He sent me the certificate when he finished the class. I put it in a drawer. I don't display certificates for things you should have known before you were born. At Harbor Pines, I led a book club one Tuesday when the regular woman got a cold. I picked A Man Called Ove because grumpy men who turn soft are a genre I trust. We sat in a circle and cried a little and laughed a lot and talked about what it means to make friends after you are done thinking you will. After that, they asked me to pick the next book. I said yes. I went back to the library and ran my fingers over the spines until one stopped me, the way fabric does when it wants to be chosen. I planted herbs in the raised beds by the patio. I taught a young volunteer how to pinch basil to make it bushier. I wrote a letter to the insurance company to thank them for putting their flag in the right place. I wrote a letter to myself and put it in the closet on the top shelf where I keep extra light bulbs. Dear Nancy, it said, please keep becoming. It suits you. In June, Lauren called. I know you didn't want us to call, she said, but I wanted to tell you I'm pregnant. I sat down before my legs decided to do it for me. I see, I said, and then, because there are children, congratulations. It's early, she said, but I wanted you to know. It felt wrong not to. I don't know where we are with each other, but I know this is a good thing, and I know you're a grandmother whether you like me or not. I don't dislike you, I said. I don't know you. I didn't say the rest. I don't know who you are when it's hard. She will show me. People always do. 3 days later, I got a text from Eric. Can I be the one to tell you big news? He attached a sonogram and a line of exclamation points like fireworks. I put the phone down and let my hand hover over it like a bird deciding whether to land. I didn't reply. I folded laundry instead. I folded a dish rag into a square so tight the fabric forgot what wrinkling was. At quilting, Lila said, New life doesn't erase old patterns. You have to decide if the new piece belongs in this quilt. Does it? I asked. She looked at me the way people look at photographs of themselves when they were young enough to not know what the photograph would mean. You'll know when you hold it, she said. Summer at Harbor Pines smells like cut grass and sunscreen. Volunteers bring popsicles on Tuesdays. We sit in the shade and eat slowly. I went to the lake more and more, the way people go to a museum again and again because they keep seeing different things. I saw a teenage boy teach his little sister to skip stones. I saw a couple in their 70s hold hands so their rings clicked. I saw a man in a wetsuit dive under and come up with a smile that was private. One morning, I woke to the sound of rain on the balcony railing and the sudden conviction to rewrite my will. I called Meg. You read my mind, she said when I told her. It's best practice after a life earthquake. We sat at her desk again. She drew little boxes on a legal pad and wrote names in them. You have assets, she said. Not everyone does. You saved. You did the things that don't make headlines. It matters. I want to give half of what I have to a fund that helps seniors who get what happened to me, I said. Call it Alive and Seen. Done, she said, and wrote it down like she was writing scripture. And the other half? For my son, I said, and she didn't blink. But with a condition. He must write a letter to your office, not to me, explaining why he did, what he learned, and how he will choose differently for the next 10 years. And he must volunteer at that elder fund once a month for a year. Not money, time, in person. Talking to people like me. Listening. He can do that, she said. He can choose not to, too. I know, I said. I will fill my life either way. Eric didn't reach out again that summer. He sent a photo when the baby grew big enough to look like something you could recognize. Baby girl, he wrote. 20 weeks. I looked at the gray and white image and thought of the first time I saw him put his hand on a fish tank at the pet store and apologize to a goldfish for tapping the glass too hard. I wondered where that apology had gone. I told Walt that I was going to the baby shower if invited. He shook his head. "You are a complicated woman, Nancy," he said. "No," I said, smiling. "I am a simple woman who refuses to ignore complicated things." The invitation came, not with flowers or fuss, but as a text. "Shower next Saturday at Lauren's friend's house." There was a link to a registry with big-ticket items and tiny bows. I bought a package of plain white onesies and a stack of board books. I included The Snowy Day because every child should learn what a footprint looks like in new snow. I included Goodnight Moon because if you're lucky, you get to say goodnight to everything you love and mean it. At the shower, I stood to the side with my paper plate and watched women I didn't know laugh at games I didn't understand. Lauren hugged me. It was tentative and gentle. Her hair smelled like something I couldn't name and didn't need to. She looked tired and happy and scared the way women do when their body is making a person and they only have so much room for anyone else. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It means a lot." "It means you asked," I said. I left early. I tucked my napkin into a trash bag and took my paper cup to the kitchen and rinsed it because old habits become rituals. I walked to my car with the feeling of having been a weather system that passed through a room. In the rear view, I saw Lauren on the porch, hand on her belly, watching the rain begin. Fall came. Leaves did what leaves do. On Halloween, Harbor Pines hosted a trick-or-treat for the daycare kids from down the block. I sat in a witch hat and handed out Smarties and told one very serious little boy that my cauldron was actually a salad bowl. He told me witches eat salad too. I said, "I always have." In November, the baby arrived. Eric texted a photo. The baby had a round face and a frown so determined it made me laugh out loud. "Her name is April," he wrote. I stared at her for a long time and said her name out loud in my empty living room so that the air could get used to it. A week later, he called. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since the meeting. "Mom," he said, "she's here. She's perfect. We're home." "I'm glad," I said. "How is Lauren?" "Tired, brave." He laughed soft. "I think she's stronger than I am." "I don't doubt that," I said. "Do you want to meet her?" he asked, almost whispering. "April?" It's a strange thing to realize you can say no to a question like that. It's stranger to realize you can say yes on your own terms. "Yes," I said. "In 2 weeks, at 11 in the morning, at Harbor Pines, in the lounge. No surprises, just you and the baby. Bring nothing for me to fix. Bring nothing you need me to save. Bring diapers and leave with your own mess." He laughed again, this time with relief in it. "Okay," he said. "Okay." For 2 weeks, I didn't pretend this was simple. I learned the baby schedule from a pamphlet I found in the library. I asked Lila to sit with me that morning until it was time. She did. She brought me a peppermint candy from her purse and told me to breathe into my belly. I did. My belly rose and fell like something that had learned to obey. At 10:58, Eric walked in with a car seat in the crook of his elbow and a small panic on his face. Babies make men both bigger and smaller. He set the seat down. April slept with her mouth open. "She looks like your father when she sleeps," I said, and Eric surprised himself by crying. "We didn't name her after anyone," he said, wiping his eyes. "We just liked it. I hope that doesn't hurt you." "There is enough name for all of us," I said. "We don't have to share this part." I learned how to hold my granddaughter by holding her. I learned how to breathe with a new baby in the room again, the way you pause because they do. I looked at her tiny, perfect fingernails and thought of all the buttons she would learn to fasten, and all the strings she would learn not to pull, and all the doors she would learn open both ways. "She's beautiful," I said. "You must be tired." "We are," he said, "but it's the good kind." We sat in the lounge with our coats draped over chairs and the soft hum of other lives around us and didn't talk about the worst thing he ever did to me. We talked about the best thing that had ever happened to him. After they left, I went upstairs and stood on the balcony. I thought about the way April's weight had felt on my shoulder and how certain and new that old feeling was. I said out loud to no one in particular, "This is mine," and meant my life. Winter again. Another year. The light changed early. Snow on the railing looked like a line someone drew and smudged on purpose. I made stew. I wrote a check to Alive and Seen for our first set of volunteer training materials. We held the first session in the chapel. 20 people showed up. Some were old like me. Some were young like the girl at the pharmacy. We talked about scams and heart crimes and the recovery that looks like calmer breathing. In January, Eric sent Meg the letter my will requires. "I want to tell my mother that I am sorry," he wrote, "but I know sorry belongs where actions live. I want to be a man who doesn't require forgiveness to be good." He signed his full name in small, careful letters. He volunteered at the fund orientation the next week, stacking chairs at the end like someone who finally understood that the end of an event is where people need help most. Sometimes he calls. Sometimes I don't answer. Sometimes I do. When I do, I imagine my one sentence again and let it keep me from the 100 things that would only undo what I've made. People at Harbor Pines ask about my son sometimes, the way you ask about weather when you don't want to intrude. "How's Eric?" they say. I say, "He is learning," and that is the truth. They ask, "How are you?" I say, "Alive," and that is the bigger truth. I think about forgiveness the way I think about Michigan roads in March, muddy, necessary, hard to keep clean. Some days I drive right through. Some days I turn around and take the long way. I no longer keep my phone on the table like a lifeline. I keep it on the counter where it belongs. I answer it because that's a choice, not a duty. I don't sleep with it near my bed. I wake to my own time. When I picture my old house, I picture the bird bath. The top is still there, a concrete bowl that's seen more beaks than people. I picture the kid next door filling it with the hose while his mother tells him to zip his coat. I picture him making a wish and not telling anyone so it can come true. I hope he learns that some wishes come true because you say them out loud and then do everything it takes. One Sunday afternoon, the sky turned that deep blue it gets in winter just before dinner, and I took a bus downtown to the lake. I walked to the end of the pier. The wind pushed at my coat like a friend joking around. Gulls circled, caught air, dropped, caught it again. A man at the end stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched, head down. When I drew close, I saw him straighten and look out at the water. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. "Do you think it forgives?" he said, not asking me. "It doesn't have to," I said. "It just keeps being what it is. We could learn from that." We stood there a while. He didn't cry or talk. I didn't touch his arm or say it would be okay. It would, and it wouldn't, and both had to get a room. When I got home, I made tea and called my sister. She asked if I was all right. I said I was more than that. I said I was alive in a way that made room for everything that wasn't done. I said I made a lasagna that would feed whoever came by. She laughed. "You're bossy again," she said, and I said, "Thank God." On my kitchen wall, there's a calendar with boats for this year, too. I circled 3 dates in red: the day my new driver's license arrived in the mail, the day April first smiled at me like she recognized something, the day the nonprofit got its first thank you note from a person who said they didn't feel invisible anymore. I don't know what will happen next. I don't need to. I used to think love was showing up no matter what. Now I think love is showing up with your whole self and not letting someone use it to climb over a fence. The other day, a young staff member at Harbor Pines told me, "You seem lighter." I told her the only true thing I know. The worst thing that happened to me became the best reason to change my life. At night, I turn off the lights in my small living room. I stand at the window and watch the pines shift in the dark, hear the wind moving through them like a whisper that belongs to the trees. I think about the first day in the Secretary of State office when a clerk told me I was dead. I think about the girl at the pharmacy who couldn't meet my eyes. I think about a letter that said I was gone, and a counter letter that said the opposite. My name is still my name. It lives on my driver's license and on my mailbox and on a file in a drawer in an office where papers tell stories. It lives in the mouths of friends who call me Nancy, and in the mouth of a baby who will one day call me whatever she calls me when she needs a cookie and a nap. My son may be the kind of man who wrote a wrong thing, and then the kind of man who writes a better one. He will decide. I decided something else. I decided that my life is not a pie other people cut. It is a quilt I'm still stitching. It has squares with mistakes and squares I made on purpose, and edges that are straight enough for me. I wake up each morning and take a breath and put my feet on the floor and make coffee and choose kindness with a spine, and then I do the next thing. Some days it is calling my sister. Some days it is going to yoga and wobbling and catching myself again. Some days it is holding a baby and letting her sleep on my chest while I sit so still it feels like prayer. I am living. That is the sentence I hold now. Not a question, not a plea, a declaration. I am living, and for as long as I get to, I'm going to do it the way the lake moves. Steady, honest, pulled by the moon and not by anyone else's string. When people ask me how you survive a thing like this, I don't say you survive. I say you become. That's the word for it, becoming. It's slow. It's sometimes ugly. It is not an apology. It is a choice. One day, maybe, April will sit on this very couch and ask me what happened between me and her father. I will tell her the truth the way you tell a child about a storm. I will tell her we stayed inside until it passed, and then we went outside and saw which trees were left and which ones had to be planted again. I will tell her to plant a lot of trees. And if she asks me what forgiveness is, I will say, make yourself a life that doesn't need the word every day. Make yourself a life that says thank you more than sorry. Make yourself a life where alive means you can look at the mirror and at the person you hurt and see the same face. I do not know if Eric will deserve a seat at my table when I am 80. That is 12 years away. It will go quick. It will take forever. I know only that I will have a table, and a tablecloth I stitched, and a candle I light for myself first. I will say grace in whatever language I'm using that year. I will eat the food I cooked or someone brought me. I will go to bed grateful for the soft weight of a blanket and the solid fact of a door that locks and opens only when I turn the handle. The morning after the snow geese left, I went to the lake again and stood where I always stand, a little to the left of the bench with the plaque with a man's name. I looked up and saw a V of cranes headed north, beating the air the way we all do when we are going home. I raised my hand and waved, a woman alive enough to tell the sky I recognized the shape of returning. If you saw me there, you might have thought I was counting the birds. I wasn't. I was counting the ways I refused to disappear. I was counting the stitches that hold this quilt together. I was counting every breath between now and the last one, adding them up like treasure, spending them as slowly as I can and as bravely as I must.